Have you ever been laughed at on a day that was supposed to be the happiest of your life? Not the playful kind of laughter, but the quiet, cutting one that stays with you long after the music stops. This story begins on a humid Saturday afternoon in Ibadan, when the sun refused to soften and the air smelled of dust, engine smoke, and fried puff-puff from a roadside seller who had set up near the gate. Under a white canopy that had seen better days, plastic chairs scraped against concrete as guests settled in. Some smiled. Some whispered. Some came only to see what they already believed would be a joke. When Sade stepped out of the small salon beside the compound, holding Kunal's hand, a ripple moved through the crowd. It wasn't applause. It was curiosity mixed with disbelief. A woman leaned toward her friend and said, "Is this the wedding we left our houses for?" The friend laughed, covering her mouth too late. Sade heard it clearly. Her heart sank, but her feet kept moving. Sade had imagined this day many times, but not like this. She had imagined joy, warmth, maybe even pride. Instead, she felt exposed, like someone had pulled back a curtain she wasn't ready for. Her ghillie was simple, tied by her younger cousin who kept apologizing for her shaking hands. Her dress fit well, nothing dramatic, nothing borrowed. Kunal's suit had been adjusted twice because money ran out before the final fitting. Still, they looked at each other and smiled, that quiet smile couples share when they're choosing each other against everything else. As they walked toward the front, the MC tried to hype the crowd, but the microphone screeched, drawing another wave of laughter. "Manage the sound," someone shouted. Another voice replied, "Manage everything today." That one hurt the most. Sade felt her throat tighten, but she lifted her chin. She had promised herself she would not cry. Not today. Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand why this laughter cut so deeply, you need to understand what this wedding meant to Sade. She grew up in a small house in Akure, where her mother sold provisions and her father left early every morning in a faded uniform, returning tired and quiet. Money conversations happened at night, in whispers. Sade learned early how to read worry on an adult's face. She learned how to manage expectations. When she met Kunal during her NYSC year, she wasn't looking for rescue. She was looking for peace. Kunal didn't impress people easily. He spoke slowly, listened more than he talked, and believed in planning even when the plan was small. When he proposed with a modest ring and an honest voice, Sade said yes without asking about dates or venues. They agreed to marry with what they had. No debt. No competition. Just faith and effort. But in a culture where weddings had become performances, that decision made them targets. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, the comments started. "You couldn't wait?" an aunt asked, shaking her head. "At least do something befitting," a colleague advised. Some friends stopped calling. Others suggested postponement until Kunal got a better job. Sade listened, nodded, and went home to cry quietly. Kunal noticed the changes. One night, as they shared a plate of rice in his small apartment, he asked, "Do you regret it?" Sade didn't answer immediately. She stared at the cracked wall, then said, "I'm afraid. But I don't regret choosing you." Kunal reached for her hand and said, "We'll grow. Just not loudly." That sentence stayed with her. She repeated it to herself on the wedding morning as she dressed. Back under the canopy, the ceremony continued. The pastor spoke about love and patience, but his words competed with murmurs from the crowd. A child cried. A generator coughed and died, plunging the place into sudden silence before someone laughed again. When it was time for the couple to kneel for prayers, Sade felt her knees touch the ground and thought of her mother's voice that morning, firm but gentle. People will talk today. Let them. Just kneel well. As hands were laid on their heads, Sade closed her eyes. She tried to block out the sounds, the stares, the embarrassment. She focused on Kunal's fingers tightening around hers. That grip felt like a promise. Somewhere behind them, a woman whispered, "God help them." It sounded like pity, not prayer. The reception was worse. Food ran out earlier than planned because extra guests showed up uninvited. Plates clinked loudly as people complained. "Is this all?" someone said again, louder this time. Another laughed and added, "Even hunger came to this wedding." The word spread quickly, becoming a joke that bounced from table to table. Sade's chest burned. She excused herself briefly and stood behind the building, breathing in the smell of damp earth and refuse. Her reflection in a cracked mirror startled her. She looked calm, almost composed. Inside, she felt small. She thought of the money she saved, the nights she stayed awake planning, the hope she carried. For the first time that day, tears slipped out. She wiped them quickly. "Not today," she whispered to herself. When Sade returned, Kunal was trying to thank guests, smiling through clenched teeth. She joined him, standing tall. One relative pulled her aside and said, "You're a strong girl. But next time, do better." Sade nodded politely, though the words replayed in her mind like a challenge. As the music played faintly and guests began to leave, the laughter softened into dismissive smiles. By evening, the compound was almost empty. Plastic chairs were stacked carelessly. The canopy sagged. The day that had taken months to prepare ended quietly. As Sade and Kunal walked home, the streetlights flickered on. No convoy. No cheering crowd. Just two people and the sound of their footsteps. Kunal broke the silence. "I'm sorry," he said. Sade stopped walking. She looked at him and said, "Don't apologize for today. Just don't give up tomorrow." He nodded, eyes glossy, and they continued. That night, in their one-room apartment, the reality of marriage settled in. The room smelled of leftover food and warm fabric. They sat on the bed, still dressed, listening to distant laughter from a neighbor's party. Sade removed her ghillie slowly, feeling the weight lift from her head. Kunal loosened his tie and sighed. "They laughed," he said quietly. Sade lay back and stared at the ceiling. "Yes," she replied. There was a pause before she added, "But laughter doesn't last forever." Kunal turned to her. "Promise me something," he said. "If things get hard, we talk. We don't let today poison us." Sade nodded. Inside her, something shifted. The shame was still there, but so was resolve. She didn't know how or when, but she knew she would not let this be the story people remembered. As Sade drifted into sleep, the sounds of the day replayed in fragments, the whispers, the jokes, the crackling microphone. Yet beneath them, another sound emerged, steady and quiet. Determination. She thought of her mother counting coins at night, of Kunal grading papers by candlelight, of herself choosing courage over delay. That wedding day marked an ending, but it also marked a beginning. People laughed because they thought they were seeing the full picture. They weren't. And as you listen to this part of the story, ask yourself honestly, if you were Sade, standing under that canopy, hearing that laughter, what would you have done next? 6 months after that wedding, nothing dramatic had changed on the outside. Sade and Kunal were still living in the same one-room apartment. The ceiling still leaked when rain fell too hard. The landlord still knocked without warning. Kunal still woke before dawn to catch 2 buses to the secondary school where he taught basic science, his shirt ironed thin at the collar. But inside Sade, something had hardened into focus. The laughter from that wedding had not disappeared. It followed her into quiet moments, especially at night. She would be lying beside Kunal, listening to his breathing, and suddenly remember a voice saying, "Is this all?" Instead of crying like before, she began to ask herself a different question. What can I do with what I have right now? It started small, almost accidentally. One evening, after returning from the market, Sade realized she had bought too much flour. Money was tight, and wasting food felt like an insult to their situation. She remembered how her mother used to fry chin-chin late at night, the sound of oil popping softly while the rest of the house slept. That night, Sade tied her wrapper, measured ingredients carefully, and began. The room filled with the smell of nutmeg and warm dough. Kunal looked up from marking scripts and smiled. "You're cooking it this time?" he asked. Sade shrugged. "I just don't want it to waste." The first batch came out uneven. Some pieces too dark, some too pale. Kunal tasted one anyway. "It's good," he said honestly. That was enough encouragement. The next morning, Sade packed the chin-chin into small nylon bags and gave them to Kunal to share at school. She didn't expect much. By evening, Kunal returned with an unfamiliar look on his face. "They're asking if you can make more," he said. Sade paused, her hands wet with soap. "Asking who?" "The teachers," he replied. "One of them wants some for her children." Sade felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a while. Hope, but cautious. That night, she made another batch, more careful this time. She adjusted the heat, listened to the oil, trusted her instincts. Orders became regular. Small, but steady. Weeks passed. Sade began to structure her days. Mornings for house chores and planning. Afternoons for buying ingredients. Nights for frying and packaging. The smell of oil became a constant companion. Sometimes she felt tired, her back aching, her fingers sore. On those nights, the wedding laughter returned louder. She would pause, close her eyes, and remember how people had looked at her under that canopy. Then she would turn the stove back on. Kunal noticed her discipline. One night, he said, "You know, you don't have to push yourself this hard." Sade replied quietly, "I do. If I stop, I'll start hearing them again." 3 months later, Sade created a small page online to post pictures of her snacks. The photos weren't perfect. The lighting was poor. But the comments were kind. Someone asked about prices. Another asked if she could supply for a birthday. Sade read the messages twice, her heart beating faster each time. When a woman from Lagos sent a message asking if Sade could supply snacks for an office event, Sade stared at the screen for a long time. It was more than she had ever handled. Her first instinct was fear. Her second was memory. The wedding day. The laughter. She typed back, "Yes, I can." After sending it, her hands shook. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept calculating costs in her head, wondering what could go wrong. The order nearly broke her. Ingredients were expensive. Power supply was unreliable. She worked through the night, the generator humming softly outside. At one point, a whole batch burned because she stepped away for too long. She sat on the floor and cried, quietly, the way she had learned to. Kunal woke up and found her there. "Let's do it together," he said simply. He helped package, helped clean, helped encourage. When the delivery finally left their compound, Sade felt empty. She waited. When the payment alert came in, she sat on the bed and stared at her phone. Then she laughed. Not loudly. Not bitterly. She laughed because for the first time since her wedding, the effort had spoken louder than the noise. Over the next year, Sade grew steadily. She didn't rush. She reinvested. She made mistakes and corrected them. She learned to say no to orders she couldn't handle yet. Kunal supported her quietly, never demanding results, only consistency. At family gatherings, people began to ask questions. "So you're selling snacks now?" an aunt asked, half interested. Sade nodded politely. "Yes." The tone was different. Less mocking. Still not respectful, but curious. Sade noticed it. She didn't respond with pride or bitterness. She responded with work. Then life tested her again. 2 years after the wedding, Sade's mother fell ill. It started with dizziness, then weakness. Hospital visits became frequent. Bills stacked up quickly. The relatives who once laughed now spoke in hushed tones. "Things are hard," someone said. Sade listened, her mind calculating. She paid what she could. When it became clear her mother needed surgery, Sade made a decision. She withdrew money she had saved for expanding her business. It hurt. She didn't announce it. She didn't complain. She remembered kneeling on that wedding day, being pitied. She would not let her mother feel that kind of helplessness. The surgery was successful. Her mother recovered slowly. One afternoon, as Sade sat beside her hospital bed, her mother squeezed her hand. "You didn't wait for life to be perfect," she said weakly. "That's why you survived." Those words settled deep inside Sade. When they returned home, Sade went back to work immediately. She rebuilt what she had spent. It wasn't easy. There were nights she wondered if the sacrifice was worth it. But every time doubt crept in, she remembered that wedding day and how far she had already come. At a family gathering later that year, the same uncle who had laughed openly at her wedding joked again. "So, Madam Businesswoman," he said, smiling, "will you now do a proper wedding?" The table went quiet. Sade looked at him calmly. "Uncle," she said, "we did what we could at the time." Her voice didn't shake. The uncle laughed awkwardly and changed the subject. That moment stayed with Sade. Not because she felt victorious, but because she felt free. Free from needing their approval.